Welcome, everyone, to our training session on navigating safety, dignity, and prevention. My name is Holly, and today we will be reviewing the critical intersections of New Hampshire state law under RSA 126-U, State Board of Education Rules Ed. 1200, and our local school board policies. Before we begin our discussion, it is vital that we establish a clear professional boundary. This session is not a physical intervention certification. We will not be teaching hold, transports, or physical intervention procedures. General training in de-escalation and policy does not authorize any school employee to implement physical restraint or seclusion. Instead, our focus today is on our most powerful tools, how we protect student safety and dignity by recognizing the early whispers of distress, regulating our own adult nervous systems, using least pressure de-escalation strategies, and maintaining absolute role clarity during a crisis. Let's look at the foundational architecture of our work. The entire New Hampshire legal framework and our local school board policies are built upon three non-negotiable pillars: safety, dignity, and the least restrictive response. First, safety. We have a legal and moral duty to protect students, peers, and staff from immediate serious physical danger. Second, dignity. We must avoid unnecessary humiliation, coercion, trauma, or loss of agency. A student in crisis is highly vulnerable, and how we respond must preserve their human dignity. Third, least restrictive. We must always use the least restrictive, least intrusive response capable of maintaining safety in that moment. We operate under a simple but profound premise: kids do well when they can. If a student is struggling, our first question must shift from how do we make this student comply to what is limiting this student's access to a safe and expected response, and what support is needed right now. Access barriers might be academic, executive functioning, communication-based, or sensory. Safety and dignity are non-negotiable, and the adult task is to notice when a student is straining and adjust our environment and demands early. How does the state statute written actually protect a child in our schools? It has to travel through 5 critical levels. At level 1, we have state law specifically, New Hampshire RSA 126-U and the administrative rules of Ed. 1200. These establish the legal definitions, human rights, and strict emergency thresholds. At level 2, our local school boards translate these laws into board policy JKAA. At level 3, our administration establishes district procedures, creating our crisis call codes, medical protocols, reporting forms, and building-level role assignments. At level 4, we have adult practice. This is the single point where policy becomes a student's lived reality. A written board policy cannot regulate a dysregulated child. Only your daily practice, like your words, your tone of voice, your physical proximity, and your self-regulation, can translate these legal protections into a safe and supportive school. And level 5 is the student experience. As the call-out box on the slide states, a policy is not implemented merely because it exists. Professional practice makes the boundary real. When we fail to practice what is in our policy, we see translation failures, such as treating simple refusal as an emergency, crowding an escalating student, or neglecting to report restrictive incidents. When a crisis does occur, we must collect that incident data and let it flow back upstream to improve our procedures and plans. This concentric model represents the heart of our behavior response philosophy. Look closely at where physical restraint and seclusion reside. They are on the outermost restricted edge. They are a highly restricted, legally controlled emergency boundary. They are never behavior management tools, punishments, or compliance mechanisms. If we are frequently operating at this outer edge, it represents a system failure, not a student failure. Our primary professional energy must be poured into the green center circle: prevention, adult self-regulation, and individualized evidence-based support. This is where we ask, what is limiting this student's access to a safe response? In the middle ring, we have de-escalation and safe space creation, our buffer zone, when a student starts to drift from baseline. On the left, we see a crucial principle. Relationship is the context, not the intervention itself. Knowing a student deeply creates the trust, history, and safety required for our instruction and behavioral supports to take root. A strong relationship helps you know what increases pressure for a student and what their early signals look like, but it does not replace the need for teaching functional replacement skills. What is one proactive support you use in your classroom daily that keeps students in the screen center? Examples, visual schedules, structured routines, and private pre-corrections. We can use the metaphor of a guardrail on a mountain road. Restraint and seclusion are like the metal guardrail on the edge of a cliff. We do not drive our cars against the guardrail to steer down the mountain. We use the steering wheel and the brakes. Proactive prevention and de-escalation are our steering wheel and brakes. Let's look at the actual statutory and policy guardrails that govern this work. New Hampshire RSA 1026-U and local school board policy J-Kaido establish clear, non-negotiable legal requirements for when restraint or seclusion may be utilized. There are 6 core requirements to understand first. Emergency only. These procedures are strictly reserved for situations where a qualifying emergency danger exists right now. This means a substantial and imminent risk of harm. Refusal, disruption, or property damage alone never justify these interventions. Second, trained personnel. Under district policy and state law, only staff who are currently trained and authorized in the district-approved crisis curriculum may implement physical restraint or seclusion. Third, other approaches first. These are not routine tools or standard behavior management techniques. We must use less restrictive, proactive supports first, unless those approaches have failed or are determined to be completely inappropriate under the circumstances. Fourth, only while necessary. Once an intervention has begun, it must stop immediately the very second that the qualifying imminent danger has dissipated and the situation is stable. Fifth, never punishment. Physical restraint and seclusion can never be used for punishment, discipline, compliance, retaliation, staff frustration, or adult convenience. Sixth, notify, document, review. Any use of these interventions triggers an immediate legal chain of events, including same-day parent verbal notice, a written report within 5 business days, and a mandatory team review of the student's plans to adjust proactive supports. The law establishes the emergency boundary. Prevention and de-escalation are how staff avoid reaching it. Our primary professional focus must always remain on preventing the escalation from ever reaching this extreme emergency threshold. The legal definitions and thresholds as New Hampshire law makes a sharp distinction between restraint and seclusion. They are not triggered by the same events. First, physical restraint. This is the manual physical restriction of a student's movement or normal access to their body. The legal emergency threshold is substantial and imminent risk of serious bodily harm to the student or others. Note that word serious. Property destruction, verbal disruption, or simple refusal to comply do not meet this threshold. The duration must be strictly limited to the time needed to protect from the qualifying risk. Second, seclusion. This is the involuntary confinement of a student in a room or area from which they are physically prevented from leaving, or reasonably believe they cannot leave. The legal threshold is substantial and imminent risk of physical harm to the student or others. It must end the absolute second that the imminent danger has dissipated. Look at the core questions at the bottom of the grid. For restraint, we ask, is movement being restricted and does the serious bodily harm threshold exist? For seclusion, we must ask, can the student leave and are adults actively preventing egress? And remember this non-negotiable classification principle? The name of a room does not control its classification. It does not matter if a door is labeled a calm-down room, a safe room, or a wellness zone. If a student is placed in that room and an adult blocks the doorway, holds the door shut, or uses a lock to prevent them from leaving, it is legally seclusion and must be reported and monitored under strict statutory rules, including continuous observation and a designated co-regulator. Here are some scenarios. 1. A student is tearing posters off the wall and knocking over chairs. No one is near them. Can we restrain them? Answer: no. Property damage alone does not equal substantial and imminent risk of serious bodily harm. 2. A student is sitting quietly in a designated sensory room, but an adult is holding the door handle from the outside so they can't run back into the hallway. Is this seclusion? Answer: yes. Exit is being prevented. The room label does not matter. To keep our practices legally compliant and instructionally sound, we must categorize our responses based on what is actually happening, not what we call them. Let's look at these 4 distinct response types. Voluntary break: the student voluntarily separates to a designated space to manage stress, and they remain physically free to exit at any moment. This is a supportive tool and is not reportable. Brief contact: this involves brief supportive touching or holding to calm, comfort, or guide a student, or temporarily holding a hand, wrist, or arm to induce them to stand and walk upright to a safe location. This is excluded from the definition of restraint under RSA 126U, but be careful. Significant, intentional contact in response to aggression or disruption must still be reported. Restraint: a manual method that actively limits freedom of movement or normal access to the body in response to an emergency. This is highly restricted and reportable. Seclusion: involuntary confinement where egress is prevented by a person, lock, barrier, or adult physical presence. This is highly restricted, requires specific room safeguards, continuous visual and auditory monitoring, a designated co-regulator, and has immediate reporting requirements. Once again, remember, we do not look at the room label, i.e. Zen Den. We look at the adult action and the student's actual freedom of movement. Think about these examples. 1. Guiding a crying elementary student to the nurse's office by gently holding their hand. Answer: brief contact. Not restraint, but maintain clinical safety. 2. Standing in front of a classroom exit door with arms crossed to block a dysregulated middle schooler from running out. Answer: seclusion. You are using your physical presence to prevent egress. Warning: if a voluntary break changes, meaning the student tries to leave but we then block the door, it instantly becomes seclusion. Crisis behavior rarely occurs out of nowhere. It builds along a curve. If we can recognize the early, quiet signals of distress, we have a far higher likelihood of supporting the student successfully and preventing a crisis. There are 5 stages of an escalation pathway, which can apply to adults as well as students. Stage 1 is baseline. The student is regulated, connected, and ready to learn. This is our instructional window, where we build relationships, teach academic and coping skills, and reinforce engagement. Stage 2 is trigger. Something in the student's environment, task, or internal state changes, causing early-stage distress or strain. Proactive adults notice this and adjust. Adjustment might be shifting the task instruction or entry point, modify the environment, provide a communication prompt, or increase predictability early. Stage 3. The early signals are the whispers of distress resulting from a trigger. The student may sigh, mutter, withdraw, or change their gaze. Look closely at the screen. This is highlighted as the best window for intervention. The student is straining, but their cognitive bandwidth is still open. Our focus here must be to support the need, reduce our verbal load, and offer one small, low-pressure next step. This is the stage when pre-taught coping skills contact real-time practice. Stage 4 is escalation to crisis. If we miss the early signal window, or if we add pressure during stage 2 or 3, the behavior will likely escalate. The student's logical brain goes completely offline and they are operating out of survival mode. Here, our focus must shift entirely to safety. Protect peers, clear hazards, reduce the audience, call for trained support, and use minimal language. Stage 5 is recovery. Once the peak crisis has passed, the student's nervous system begins to cool down. We must focus on stabilizing the student, offering a brief, non-shaming reconnection, and design a structured, low-demand re-entry back into their classroom routine. Crisis behavior rarely occurs out of nowhere. It builds along a pathway. But what we often miss is that escalation is a two-way street. It is a transaction between the student's nervous system and our own. This is the dual escalation loop. Let's look at the left column, student early signals. These are the whispers of distress. They can be facial or physical, like jaw tension, eye rolling, sudden stillness, or pacing. They can be communication-based, like sighing, muttering, or repeating questions. Or they can be task-based, like pushing materials away or scanning peers. These are not defiance. They're early self-regulation attempts under strain. If we ignore them or respond with louder demands, we push them into crisis. Now look at the right column. Adult early signals. When a student begins to strain, our own nervous systems often react. We feel internal urgency, our breathing quickens, and we fear losing control of the room. Physically, we might stand directly in front of the student, lean over, or step closer. Verbally, we might repeat directions more loudly, speak faster, lecture, or issue ultimatums. When we do this, we inject heat into an already overloaded student. To break this loop, we must execute the adult reset. Hour your voice, slow your speech, move your body slowly, step back to increase space, and focus on the next small, safe action, rather than demanding immediate compliance. Our adult self-regulation sets the ceiling for the student's regulation. Here is a quick self-reflection activity. Close your eyes for 10 seconds and think about your own personal adult early signal. Do you hold tension in your jaw? Do you cross your arms? Do you start talking faster? Knowing and noticing our own early signals is the first step in supporting students in the early stages of escalation. An effective educator never tries to teach algebra to a student in the middle of a panic attack or an aggressive crisis. We must match our response to the student's level of cognitive and emotional access. Let's walk through this 4-quadrant matrix. Quadrant 1, ready to learn, accessible. The student is regulated and connected. This is our instructional window. This is when we teach academic content, practice coping skills, model replacement behaviors, and reinforce positive engagement. Quadrant 2, starting to strain. The student is starting to drift. Their cognitive bandwidth is narrowing. They can still hear you, but they are struggling. Here, we must reduce our verbal load. We deliver a brief, neutral prompt, offer a single small step, and maintain a quiet, supportive presence. Quadrant 3, overloaded or unsafe. The student is in a full crisis. Their logical brain is completely offline, and they are operating entirely out of their survival brain. We do not teach, lecture, or process consequences here. Safety is our only focus. We maintain physical space, designate one lead voice, and call for trained support. Quadrant 4, recovering and returning. The storm has passed and the student's nervous system is cooling down. Our job is to reconnect briefly without shame or lecturing, plan a structured, low-demand re-entry back into the routine, and save the deep review and teaching of replacement skills for later when they are fully back in Quadrant 1. What happens if we try to issue a consequence or demand an apology while a student is in Quadrant 3 overloaded? Answer: we push them right back into a peak crisis. It is an escalation trap. When we recognize early signals of strain, our primary goal is to reduce pressure. We have 3 practical, evidence-based moves we can use. Move 1, support the need. We offer help or a safe option without validating unsafe behavior. For example, we might say, "This looks tough. Do you want help with the first part? Or would you prefer a 1-minute reset? Or show me the hardest part and we can do it together." Move 2, redirect to one small action. We break the task demand down to the absolute smallest next step to bypass their panic response. We say, "First sentence only, then I'll check back," or "put the item down." Move 3, give the brain time. When a student is highly activated, more language increases pressure. We back off and allow physical and cognitive space. It's okay to make a statement like, "Take a minute. I will be right here. You do not have to talk to me yet. Look at the orange box at the bottom. Do not add heat." We must strictly avoid student sandwiching, crowding, or surrounding the student with multiple adults, arguing to win, trying to prove the student wrong or force submission, sarcasm, public shame, or humiliating comments, competing directions, multiple adults talking at the same time. In these moments, you are not trying to win an interaction. You are trying to stabilize the situation, protect dignity, and keep everyone safe. Here is a clinical tip and reminder that nonverbal communication, like placing your body at an angle, using open hands, slow movements, and staying 5-6 feet back, is just as important as a spoken script. Under New Hampshire law and district policy, procedures are not implemented merely because a policy exists. To make these protections functional, procedures and processes must be clear and consistent at the building level. This slide outlines information that should be generated as a building and is in line with the earlier slide demonstrating how law moves down into practice and ultimately student experience. 1. Emergency call method. The exact intercom code, phone extension, or button used to summon trained support. 2. Current trained, authorized responders. The specific names of staff in your building currently certified in hands-on intervention. 3. Nurse/medical response. The procedure to check for injuries and document medical care following any incident. 4. Room clear destination plus peer supervision. The designated safe space where classmates will be relocated and who will supervise them. 5. Reporting form and internal recipient. Where your building's approved reporting form is located and who receives the completed copy. 6. Parent-family notification role. The specific administrator responsible for making the legally mandated same-day verbal notification. 7. IEP 504 review routing. Who coordinates scheduling the mandatory team meeting within the legal timeline after a first-use event? This decision pathway represents the absolute core of our role safety and legal protection for our classroom teachers, paraprofessionals, and support specialists who are not certified in hands-on intervention. If a situation begins to escalate, you must run through this mental decision tree. Step 1. Notice change early. Lower your intensity, reduce language, increase physical space, and use one de-escalation move. Step 2. Ask, is there an immediate physical safety risk? If no, continue least pressure support, adjust the environment, and give the student time. If unclear or increasing, call for trained support early, create space, reduce the audience, and safely remove accessible hazards. If yes, activate your building's emergency response system immediately. Step 3. Ask, am I currently trained and authorized in physical intervention? If yes, you will follow district-approved crisis protocols only when the emergency threshold is met. If no, focus exclusively on peer protection and maintaining distance. A non-negotiable warning: do not improvise a hold. Do not use your body or doorways to trap the student. Do not crowd. Improvised holds and trapping a student are not only highly dangerous and trauma-inducing, they are illegal and violate New Hampshire RSA 1.26u. If a student wants to run out of your classroom into the hallway and you stand in the doorway blocking them, you are trapping them. That is seclusion. Let them go. The hallway is a larger, safer space than a small classroom where they might corner you. This is also why having and knowing the info in the prior slide is important. The untrained staff role is protect peers, call for help, create space, communicate facts, and report. When a crisis event occurs and multiple staff members are in the room, we must have a structured environment. More adults do not mean more adult talking. In fact, multiple voices lecturing, giving demands, or arguing will guarantee a catastrophic escalation. Also, knowing and communicating roles prior to crisis situations is important. During a crisis is not time to make these decisions. Let's look at the roles shown in this classroom model. Adult 1, the lead communicator. This is the one calm voice talking to the student. They use minimal language, stay at an angled stance, maintain a safe distance, and never argue. This is typically the person with the strongest relationship with the student. All other adults in the room must remain completely silent and let this lead communicator speak. Adult. Adults, the secondary adult. This staff member focuses on keeping the surrounding environment safe, moving furniture, blocking hazards, and supporting the lead communicator silently without interfering. Adult third, the third adult. This person manages the door, coordinates the building call system for trained responders, keeps pathways clear, and monitors the safety of the rest of the classroom. Notice the doorway note. Room clearing is a peer safety action, not a punishment. If a student is unsafe, moving classmates out of the room is a proactive safety move that also removes the peer audience effect, helping the student de-escalate. Also, there should be a predictable building procedure so students know exactly where to go. Role alignment. If a behavior specialist or administrator walks into your room during an incident, what should you do? Answer. Hand off the lead communicator role clearly, if appropriate, or step into the secondary third role. Do not both talk at the student. Notice the spacing of the lead communicator. They are not standing directly in front of the student, and they are not blocking the student's exit. There are strict, non-negotiable legal requirements that apply whenever seclusion is used. Even in those extremely rare emergencies where seclusion is legally permitted, meaning there is an imminent risk of physical harm, the law does not allow us to simply put a child in a room and walk away. New Hampshire RSA 10-126-U 5- establishes strict, non-negotiable room conditions and co-regulation rules that must be met first. Let's look at the seclusion room requirements. The space must be age, size, and behavior appropriate. It must have comparable ceiling height, climate, ventilation, and lighting to the rest of the school. It must also be entirely free of dangerous objects. The door must have safeguards that automatically release in an emergency. It must have an unbreakable observation window or equivalent device that permits safe, direct, and uninterrupted observation of every single part of the room. And there must be direct and continuous visual and auditory monitoring of the student at all times by staff trained in safe seclusion. Second, look at the co-regulator and return plan on the right side of the slide. The law mandates that a co-regulator must be designated to monitor the child, support their regulation, and help plan the return to a less restrictive setting. There's a strict legal preference order for who serves as the co-regulator. First, a trusted adult selected by the child. Second, a trauma-informed clinician or counselor. Third, a staff member with a positive relationship. And fourth, a staff member who is not involved in the precipitating incident. Finally, the co-regulator must perform checks and document them no more than 30 minutes apart. Every use of seclusion is heavily regulated. If any of these room conditions, monitoring duties, or co-regulation requirements are not met, the seclusion is legally non-compliant regardless of the emergency. Why does the law establish such a detailed preference order for the co-regulator? How does having a trusted, non-involved adult support the student's nervous system in de-escalating? The power of co-regulation and relational safety are critical in maintaining the well-being of the child during a crisis. New Hampshire law is extremely clear about what is strictly prohibited in our schools. There is no gray area here. No school employee may ever use or threaten any dangerous restraint or behavior control technique. Let's look at the prohibited techniques in the left column. Prone restraint, forcing a student face down on the ground, and any method that obstructs breathing or respiratory capacity is strictly illegal. Any technique that places pressure or compression on the chest, lungs, sternum, diaphragm, back, or abdomen is prohibited. We must never cover a student's face, put pressure on or into the mouth, nose, eyes, or face, or use techniques that endanger life or worsen a medical condition. Using pain to obtain compliance is strictly prohibited. The release of noxious, toxic, or unpleasant substances is illegal. And any technique that unnecessarily exposes a child to ridicule, humiliation, or emotional trauma is prohibited. Now let's look at the school-specific limits in the right column. New Hampshire public schools are strictly limited to physical restraint. Medication restraint, using drugs to control behavior, is completely prohibited. Mechanical restraint, using devices, ties, or handcuffs to restrict movement, is prohibited except under very specific transportation provisions. Trained staff must continuously observe the child during any restraint, and we must release the child immediately at the very first sign of medical distress. These prohibitions remain absolute. Positive intent, a difficult situation, or staff frustration never excuse the use of a prohibited technique. These rules are designed to protect student life. Prone restraint and chest compression can be fatal. If you ever witness a prohibited technique being used, you have a professional duty to intervene and report it immediately under Ed 1200. Once the immediate crisis has ended and danger has dissipated, we do not simply drop the student back into their seat and say, "Okay, open your notebook." We must follow a structured pathway back to learning. Let's walk through these 5 steps. Step 1, stabilize. We confirm that the immediate danger is over. We address any physical or medical needs, reduce sensory stimulation, and ensure the student and the involved staff have sufficient time to regulate. Step 2, reconnect. We use brief, non-shaming, non-punitive language to restore a sense of safety and belonging. We say, "That was really hard, but you are safe now and we are going to reset." Step 3, return. We design a structured, low-demand route back into the classroom routine. We do not demand an immediate public apology or force them to complete all missed work right away. We preserve accountability while matching their current neurological capacity. Step 4, report. We verbally report the incident to our administrator immediately and write a factual, objective report. Step 5, review. As a team, we analyze what happened to adjust our proactive prevention plan. Restorative accountability follows regulation. Forcing a student to write an apology letter, clean up thrown items, or participate in a restorative circle while their brain is still activated is not restorative. It is an escalation trap that will restart the crisis. We teach repair and reflect only when the student is fully regulated. The repair and return accountability process is also designed specific to the need of child. Following any emergency intervention, including physical restraint, seclusion, or reportable intentional physical contact, strict legal and administrative timelines are triggered under New Hampshire law. These are non-negotiable mandates, and there are no exceptions. The timeline: immediate. The moment the danger has ended, the employee who used the intervention must verbally report it to the principal or supervising administrator. We must preserve facts, identify witnesses, and address medical needs. Feelings are not facts. Same day, as soon as practicable, and no later than the child's return to their parent or guardian, or the end of the business day, whichever is earlier, the school must make reasonable efforts to verbally notify the parent, guardian, and guardian ad litem. Within 5 business days, the employee who used the intervention must submit the required formal written notification to the director or superintendent using the approved state reporting form. Within 2 business days of receipt, the director designee must send or transmit this written report to the parent or guardian and guardian ad litem. Look at the crucial note at the bottom. First, use of restraint or seclusion for a student with an IEP or 504 plan requires a team review. The school must convene the IEP or 504 team to review the current plan and make indicated adjustments to eliminate or reduce the future use of these emergency procedures. A parent may also request a review after any instance, and the request must be granted when multiple instances have occurred. A compliance warning is as follows. A private decision that an event doesn't count or is not worth writing up is a serious compliance violation. If we restrict a student's movement or block them from leaving a room, even for 30 seconds, we are legally required to run this entire timeline. When in doubt, report the facts and let administration classify the event. While our standard 5-day reporting timeline is the baseline, there are 4 critical case-specific legal duties that we must understand. These are triggered by specific events and carry their own non-negotiable statutory rules under RSA 126-U. First, look at significant intentional physical contact, top left. Under RSA 126-U, 7, if an employee has intentional physical contact in response to student aggression, misconduct, or disruption, it is reportable if it is significant, such as blocking a blow or forcing release from a grasp. It requires prompt same-day parent notice and a written description within 5 business days, even if it does not meet the technical definition of a restraint. Ordinary non-combative escorts are excluded. Second, look at IEP 504 review top right. When restraint or seclusion is used for the very first time on a student with an IEP or Section 504 plan, the school must convene the IEP or 504 team. The team must review the current plan and make indicated adjustments to eliminate or reduce the future use of these emergency procedures. Third, look at extended restraint bottom left. Restraints should be extremely brief. Any restraint extending beyond 15 minutes requires immediate approval by the director or supervisor. If it extends beyond 30 minutes, an authorized supervisor must conduct a face-to-face assessment of the child's physical and emotional well-being, which must repeat at least every 30 minutes and be fully documented in the written report. Fourth, look at serious injury or death, bottom right. In the event of a serious injury or death during an emergency intervention, the school must make immediate notifications to the Commissioner of Education, the Attorney General, and the state's Protection and Advocacy Agency, followed by a formal written report within 5 business days. Finally, notice the bottom banner. Ed. 1200 establishes a professional duty to report when you have reason to believe another person's actions violated RSA 1026-U. Good faith reporting is legally protected, and harassment or retaliation is strictly prohibited. If we find ourselves repeatedly clearing classrooms, calling for crisis teams, or executing restraints and seclusions for the same student, we must step back. A repeated crisis is a system signal, not a student problem. As the text on the slide notes, a room clear, restraint, or other emergency response may resolve immediate danger, but it does absolutely nothing to change the underlying conditions that produced the crisis in the first place. When a pattern begins to repeat, we are legally and professionally obligated to enter this simple review cycle. Step 1, notice recurrence. We collect data on what keeps happening, the frequency, duration, and intensity. Step 2, find the pattern. We analyze the ABCs, the setting, the academic task, peer interactions, and adult responses. Step 3, change prevention and teach support. We adjust the physical environment, modify instruction, update the student's behavior intervention plan BIP, and teach a functionally matched replacement skill. Step 4, monitor impact. We track safety, student access, lost instructional time, and recurrence to see if our changes are working. Repeated events must trigger team reviews and proactive support adjustments. We must use our IEP, 504, BIP, FBA, or MTSS processes to address the emotional, communication, or academic barriers before they reach a crisis level. As we close our core content today, I want to leave you with 5 practical commitments that you can carry directly into your daily practice. These 5 commitments summarize our entire de-escalation and safety philosophy. Commitment 1 is notice early. We must look for subtle changes from a student's baseline before their behavior becomes a crisis. Remember, early signals like sighing or head-down posture are invitations to support, not signs of defiance. Early awareness opens the door to proactive support. Commitment 2 is check yourself. Your nervous system sets the ceiling for the student's regulation. We must notice our own adult early signals and execute the adult reset. Lowering our voice, slowing our body, and creating space, we must lower our own pressure before we ask the student to do the same. Commitment 3 is use one move. When a student is straining, keep it simple. Less is more. Select one of our 3 educator moves. Support the need, redirect to one small step, or give the brain time. One clear, purposeful, low-demand response is infinitely more effective than piling on more demands. Commitment 4 is know your role. If a crisis occurs, stay in your lane. If you are not trained, focus exclusively on peer protection, safe distance, calling for help, and communicating facts. Never improvise a hold and never block an exit. Following training and policy keeps everyone safe and respected. Commitment 5 is learn from patterns. Remember that a repeated crisis or room clear is a system signal, not a student problem. We must collect simple data, find the patterns, and adjust our environment, plans, and instruction. Reflection and data drive better decisions and stronger systems. Our response to behavior is a system signal. Every interaction either reduces risk or reinforces it. Let's commit to making every interaction one that reduces pressure and preserves dignity.